have other headlines that say, detaining U.S. citizens, how did we get here? And I got an email from your office last night, kind of pointing out the facts of this, and I was wondering if you could clarify, and I understand you want to clarify. That's why you called in today.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot of these same concerns as well, and I want to make sure everybody's clear and understands what we voted on in the House last night was not the Senate version that has caused all the stir.
Okay.
In fact, the Senate version did not clarify or specify the protection of the U.S. citizen in this context. So the opinion that was rendered by Judge Sessions was rendered on that Senate bill, not on the House bill. And so the House bill is very clear, and it says, this is H.R. 1540, page 657, section 1022 of the bill says, quote, applicability to United States citizens and lawful resident aliens. 1, United States citizens. The requirement to detain a person in military custody under this section does not extend to citizens of the United States. So this bill does not give the President the authority to override the exemption of U.S. citizens from detention. And the bill that passed the House yesterday, again, it's H.R. 1540, contains 3 reasons that would allow people to be detained. 1, they must not be U.S. citizens. 2, they must belong to a terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda. And 3, they must be planning or engaging in acts harmful to the United States. So it's very, very clear that H.R. 1540 actually strengthens existing laws that allow the federal government to identify or to indefinitely hold in military custody foreign nationals associated with Al-Qaeda who have participating in planning or carrying out an attack against the United States. But under no circumstances does this legislation permit the indefinite detention of American citizens.
Now that's encouraging. I got to tell you. But you were just talking about the Senate version of the bill. You were very clear saying that this is not the Senate version. So is that to say that you interpreted the Senate version as something that was going to be an issue?
I think that had the Senate version, it did raise a lot of eyebrows, and Judge Sessions rendered his opinion based on the fact that there weren't sufficient protections in the Senate version, which is why in the House those protections were implemented to make sure that U.S. citizens were specifically identified and protected, and that we know that we have to continue to prosecute the war on terror, but at the same time we are respecting U.S. citizens and the rights under the Constitution. And that was the opinion of Judge Sessions, as I understand it, on the Senate piece. But that opinion did not apply to the House piece. In fact, he conferenced with a number of members yesterday after this controversy sort of bubbled up and reviewed and said, yes, my opinion was rendered based on the Senate piece. The House piece was not part of that opinion.
Okay. Go ahead and inform the listeners who Judge Sessions is and why his opinion commands respect.
Judge Sessions is a former FBI director. In fact, spanned over 3 administrations, Reagan, Bush, and Clinton. And he is now a federal judge, but he is a very well-respected constitutional scholar and obviously somebody who has been engaged in at the very highest levels of protecting the constitutional rights of U.S. citizens.
Okay.
And so his opinion carries a lot of weight, obviously, and I think that was what probably initially stirred people up, was that they weren't clear on the fact that the opinion that he rendered was based on the Senate piece and not the House piece. Okay.
So he had a problem with the Senate version, and he called in the conference and said, "I don't have a problem with this version. It's a lot better. It's protecting the civil liberties and not going to enable the military just to detain an American citizen without charge or trial." That's what you're telling us, just to be perfectly clear.
Absolutely. And I mean, you could probably come up with any number of scenarios. We've looked at this a lot over the last 24 hours, and we may not like, I think it's pretty safe to say we don't like, we absolutely abhor the Major Hassan murders that took place down at Fort Hood.
Yeah.
However, he's a U.S. citizen, and as such, he gets due process under the Constitution. I want to make that clear that this bill does not compromise due process under the Constitution for U.S. citizens. That's just all there is to it.
And that's fantastic. And I'm glad we've cleared this up. And I'm sure the folks in Northeast Arkansas and Arkansas are glad as well. Can you talk a little bit about President Obama's veto threat here? Wasn't he saying originally he was going to veto? Was he talking about the House bill, or was he talking about the Senate bill? Can you add any clarity on that issue?
I really couldn't. He has threatened to veto so many different things over the last 11 months that, it's hard to keep it straight. So, every time we pass a bill, he threatens to veto it, but the bad news is, I guess the good news for him is that his partners in the Senate insulate him from having to make any kind of vetoes because they just don't take up our bills. And so that if there were going to be a controversial piece of legislation he wasn't comfortable with, rather than send it to him and force him to either sign it into law or veto it, they just put it on ice and protect him. And that's unfortunate, but that's been the process all year long. And I think I know that we're frustrated with it over here in the House. I know that folks in First District of Arkansas, all across the state of Arkansas, are frustrated with that kind of behavior. But that's what's taking place, and it is, it's time for the president to take a leadership role and start to engage in these important pieces of legislation that we're sending over to the Senate.
I agree, and I know you're a busy man, but I just want to ask you two more questions on a couple of issues here. We have the Medicare, tax cut, the payroll tax cut bill did pass the House. Can you give us an update on what's going on with that? And I understand, there's also the omnibus bill that's being floated out there. What are your thoughts on those two issues?
Well, it's actually the payroll tax cut. It relates to Social Security.
Oh, okay, my apologies.
Yeah, rather than Medicare. And what that is basically is reduces the amount of withholding. So, that essentially anybody that's got a job basically has more in their paycheck because there's less withheld.
Yeah.
And so that was the basis of this is just to extend that payroll tax cut. And so that was part of this package. That was, and I'll tell you, it passed 234 votes. There were a number of Democrats that voted in the affirmative on that package, and one of the key components was the Keystone Pipeline. Again, we're talking about 20,000 jobs here in the United States. That has an immediate impact, and as these type of projects start to progress, the ancillary benefit, they're looking at potentially 100,000 ancillary jobs in support industries. And so in the main, we're looking at 20,000 jobs almost immediately, all up and down the middle part of the country.
And here in Arkansas. And right here at home.
WellSpun that has spent 18 months of their last productive months with 100% of their production devoted to the Keystone Pipeline, and as a result of the president's statements, they're forced to lay people off. So there were 61 jobs lost as a result of the president's position. So not only are we looking at not creating jobs, now we're actively engaged in stopping and cutting jobs as a result of his inaction on this deal. And so, it's time for him to get with the program. Talking about we can't wait. We can't wait for the president to lead and take some action on this. We've got an opportunity to address our energy independence in a real productive way. We've got an opportunity to address our job creation environment in a real productive way. And the president wants to take a pass on it because he doesn't want to offend his environmental lobbyists who fund his campaign very heavily. And so that's unfortunate. But the fact remains that there are Americans looking for these jobs, and they need some help.
I get the feeling, Congressman Crawford, that they kind of are wanting to have it both ways. The Obama administration wants to act like that they're pro-jobs, but then they come across with their policies as anti-job creators. And, is that kind of the way you see it?
Absolutely. you have to decide whose side you're on here. Are you going to be on the side of the environmental lobby on every issue? Or are you going to be on the side of the American people? And when you start to look at the folks in Nebraska, the governor, I've heard him say, everybody that's involved in this, they're willing to address the environmental impact that this Keystone Pipeline might impose, and it's not a negative impact because they've been able to reroute the Keystone Pipeline to make sure they're not damaging any of the aquifers, and these people are working in an environmentally sound way. And I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction. It's the first reaction of the environmental lobby to attack these types of projects. And, at some point in time, we have to determine what our priorities are in this country. And do we have is energy independence one of our priorities? If not, it should be. Is job creation one of our priorities? If not, it should be. Both of those two things ought to rank pretty high on the list of what our priorities are as a nation. And unfortunately, the president just doesn't see it that way.
No, it's clear that he doesn't, and I think Arkansans and America in general, we're sick and tired of it, and we're ready for something different. I just want to throw it back out there. I mean, there's people talking of maybe another government shutdown. I mean, do you know anything? Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, we've done everything we could as a conference and as a body to avoid a government shutdown, and when things start to go against the Senate, then they start to blow that trumpet of a government shutdown again. And we certainly don't want to see that. That's why we're here. We're going to be here until we get the job done and make sure that our government is funded and open for business and taking care of our responsibilities. But, we can't continue to engage in this kind of brinksmanship that Senator Reid is perfectly willing to engage in. Week after week, month after month, and the American people are tired of that. We don't need to keep putting things off. We know what needs to be done to make sure that our government runs, and taking it down to the last minute to create more political drama for whatever political gain you think that there might be is completely irresponsible and unacceptable. And I think, at least I know folks in Arkansas are sick of it. I am.
Yeah, and it seems like it happens every Christmas. I mean, this has gone on now for a couple of years, and honestly, if you look back historically, a lot of stuff tends to happen around the holidays, and I guess that's kind of where we'll leave it. And Congressman Crawford, I appreciate you calling in, spending time with us, and I guess to recap, we're not going to be able to be unlawfully detained. Because if we're an American citizen, and it sounds to me like you're doing a good job, and I really appreciate you reaching out to the show and your office. I just want to say, be on record here, your office was so cooperative with my questions and getting me responses about this particular piece of legislation, and I'm glad we could get the facts out there today.
Hey, we're glad to do it, and I know folks back home. I see them every week because I'm home every week. I live in the 1st District of Arkansas. I don't live in D.C., and my kids are right now, my son had a little Christmas pageant at school out at Valley View, and my wife is going about her business, and we live in Jonesboro, and we're proud of it. But I'm sitting here rather, holding the Constitution of the United States in my hand and looking at this bill. I campaigned strongly on believing in the Constitution, and I'm not going to compromise on that. And I took an oath when I joined the Army to support and defend the Constitution, and that oath has no expiration date. And I reaffirmed that oath January 3rd of this year when I was sworn in to represent the 1st District of Arkansas. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to execute the duties of this office and protect the citizens of the 1st District of Arkansas.
Wow. I want to thank you, Congressman Crawford. That's fantastic. It's great to hear that the people of the 1st District have somebody who believes in the Constitution the way you do, because I know we didn't have that before.